Hello, I'm Cynthia Hawkins. A painter for many years. I recently spent 15 years as a gallery director at the State University of New York in Geneseo, and left there in 2021, and have had like a really terrific, engagement with my work in a full-time and rich way. So I'm really happy about that. And a mutual friend of mine and Harry Kramer's Carter Q reintroduced me to him and his work. And so a week ago, I was looking at notes from the Woodshed by Jack Whitten, and he mentioned Charles Cajori, and I thought, oh my gosh. So then I wanted to immediately have this conversation with Harry and, connect some dots to like really sort of like, it's almost from Jack Whitten as a student to myself, to Charles Cajori, and to Harry Kramer. So this is really more about he and I as artists and a little bit of our history. And there will be a rolling PowerPoint that'll show some of a little trajectory of our work from the 70s to lately. Harry Kramer, teacher and artist, and for a long time, and I really love his work. It is really, I think, moving. And so he's gonna introduce himself and tell us a little bit about his background, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I'd like to begin by saying I really love your work also. I was so happy to see it. I was so happy that Carter brought it to my attention. It's very impressive, very beautiful. I don't know if Queens had anything to do with it, or I don't know, did Cajori, was he an influence?
Yeah, in a way, but back then when I started Queens College, I was planning to be a watercolor painter. And then that quickly fell to the wayside. And I wanted to paint like, be like Charles Birchfield, like make it vibrate, whatever I was doing, But then I realized after my last figurative painting that I was not interested in the figure at all, but in movement. And then I just started drawing all the exercise equipment in the workout room, and they evolved into geometric abstraction. So I don't think, it's a literal influence, but it's certainly being open to, what I was doing as a student was important.
Yeah, I think the thing I had in common with Cajori, I mean, he was a friend. We both were very much into drawing. And I spent so much of my life as a teacher teaching drawing. So I think certain figurative elements do come into the work. I never thought of myself as either an abstract painter or a figurative painter. I like good painting. And it doesn't make much difference to me whether I can find a figure or not. I think for me, abstraction has to do with when you focus on a language more than the object. And if I ended up my life painting figures, it wouldn't make much difference to me. Somebody once said to me, actually it was a dealer said to me, most of the people in my gallery are figurative painters and you're not. And she said, how do you feel about that? I said, well, if I was working on a painting and all of a sudden it looked like George Washington, I'd say, hey, George, how you doing? So, but drawing's always been a part of, I mean, I think I drew before I could speak even. Not because I necessarily liked it, but because it was just something I did. It was like same thing as speaking to me. It was drawing.
Let me share my screen so I can get this PowerPoint going, which I have right here somewhere. There it is. And get this started. Let's see, this. Of course, you're sharing your screen. Thank you very much. And this is slideshow. Okay, got it. Slideshow, right from the beginning. There we go. And it's timed, so it'll just roll. It's like 45 seconds each slide, which seems forever, but it gives you a chance to really see the paintings. And sorry. So well, I don't know, when you talk about the figure versus, you're talking about the content, how it, whether it's figurative or abstraction. I, on the other hand, like have like sort of, I wouldn't say like an aversion, but I really do not want to be referencing the body, like I feel, yeah, pretty strongly about that. I'd rather, I feel like I try to, like, I'm always trying to make something that is other than itself, so if I were to, one wouldn't recognize it as such.
Well, for me, I like when I look at a painting and I say, it looks like it is something, but I can't put a name on it. But it has the particularity of a figure painting, but I don't know if it's a figure. I don't know if it's a landscape. I don't know exactly what it is. But I mean, Ashel Gorky was one of my early influences. And one of the things I liked about Gorky was I'd see these forms. I knew they were of something, but I hadn't a clue what they were. So I was forced to look at them abstractly, which I think ultimately is what I want. You're showing these early works. This is a painting. It's called Deposit. I worked with triangles and I worked in black and white for about 10 years. And the reason I got to it was because I was painting figuratively and I wanted to move out of it. So at one point, I took a sheet of paper and free-handedly drew a little triangle, a little equilateral triangle in the center of the sheet. And I looked at it and I said, boy, it's doing something. I said, I wonder if I put one on either side of it. And it was all freehand. So I said, this is sort of interesting. I think I'll color them all black so I can see them better. And that led to actually to 10 years worth of work. And it's sort of like when the French have that expression, dumb like a painter. I was a prime example. This painting here is when I at some point I felt like I had to move out of the triangle, out of the geometry. This one also. So I started, and I missed working with the paint. I missed the stuff. So I started putting the paint down more with a spatula, scraping it, washing it, scraping it, washing it. And most of the time it never worked until the very end, when I'd work my way through all my cliches and get very angry with the painting and just go into it two-fistedly. This painting to me has figurative elements, but it doesn't make any difference to me one way or another. This one also, this is called Deacon Rides Again. And the yellow came at the very end. And it was really a kind of a, what can I do to make this painting really bad? Because good is not what a painting needs to be. It needs to be real in itself. So I got extremely angry and agitated, and I put the yellow in. I just went in it two-fistedly. It's called Deacon Rides Again. My titles usually have nothing to do with the painting. This is called Good Morning, Sweet Toots. Toots was my cat, and I finished the painting. I said, well, good morning, Sweet Toots. I think she might have been around at that time. I think it has a feeling maybe of landscape figure. I don't know, but it's the language that I'm interested in. The positioning of the blacks, the positioning of the negative whites, the bits of geometry that come in. I work on paintings for an extremely long time, sometimes as much as 3 or 4 years. This one came relatively quickly, and I like that. I think the quicker ones are the better ones. This is another, I started moving more into kind of a gesture of a figure. And I think it really does have to do with my looking at the model so much as a teacher that I couldn't shake it out of my system. And it gave me some kind of a handle. A friend of mine looked at this painting and he said, well, it looks like a big bug. And I said, well, that's okay. I mean, I didn't see it, but it was okay. It's like Faulkner said, if you see it, I wrote it.
One of the things I really love about these paintings is, well, first of all, it's really visceral, the feeling of the paint on the canvas. It's really sumptuous, and with that, there's all this activity with the linear aspects of the painting. And to me, like that earlier one we saw with the yellow on it, I mean, to me, that makes that painting. You know what I mean? It's like to me, I would think that you were thinking like, I need some kind of color that's really going to, in some ways, be a complement to that deep blue, that has aspects of, in it that of like a bluish purple, so that it would make that yellow really like pop. Then it does, but I would think of it in terms of like, what can I do as through color to make this, energize this. But
Yeah.
but you end up with the same thing, you know what I mean? Accomplishing the same goal with, in a different way.
Well, for me, it was a little bit like, we've talked about how we both have been influenced by jazz. And for me, the yellow is sort of like, sometimes in jazz, like maybe in Monk or it's like you put something down and it's a mistake, or you think it's a mistake, and then you put something down next to it and it redeems itself. It becomes a virtue rather than a mistake. And it has a kind of unpredictability also, which,
Yeah.
I mean, I like when I look at a painting and I can't tell how it was done. It's just done. Anyway, these are later things. And I think that they do have more figurative elements to them, but I don't think the figure gets in the way.
Yeah. Well, this one for sure for sure does to me. But you're absolutely right. That you see it, but you don't rely on it for to understand the painting, to get into it at
Right.
all.
Right.
Very nice, really very nice. So this the way you use your brush, the mark making, as it were, that I can see where that could take some time, because it's sort of like to me, it's like a physical, response. Like you put the line down and then you have to figure out if it should stay or not. So I can see why it takes you, you work on them for a long time.
I also find that I like sometimes to see the history of the painting in the painting itself. Like there's a kind of a record of its evolution. It doesn't overpower, but it's part of it.
So let me ask you, so why, I mean, I would say that for me, when I started, first of all, let me just say that as a student in 1972, I have this sense of memory of just doing my work. I don't have much of a memory of doing classwork. I would go to class, but I always had my own, was working on the work that I wanted to do. So, because I started out with this geometric abstraction as well, like the charcoal drawings for I don't even know how long, like a year or more. And then it evolved to these paper pastel geometric pieces, and then to paint. But I don't know why. I mean, I remember looking at Mondrian. Mondrian was a real source. Mondrian's drawings of the trees, right? That evolving away from the, actual depiction of a tree to this geometric, this accumulation of geometric shapes, right? That we see ends up with Boogie Woogie Broadway and all those other later paintings of his. But I could see through him that you could use the real world to get somewhere else, and that I think was the most important thing I probably learned back then.
Yeah, I think it reads. I understand what you say about mowing around the trees. I don't think they were a direct influence, but it did enter in. I mean, it is a question of it grows from trees to something where the tree gets lost and he moves into what he gleaned from working on the trees. And it's a far distance from what he ended up with, but if you pay attention, yeah, you can see there's a track. There's a progression. These are very beautiful.
Oh, thanks. So currency of meaning is I was was a artist in residence at the Studio Museum, and I was still, when I started there, was still doing these abstract expressionist big paintings. And because when I was at Queens College, I became also very fixed on Hans Hofmann and as well. And so that informed my work too, but that was more, I think that with color theory had a big impact, using color to move things in and out of space.
Yeah,
And
I had a period of thinking a lot about Hoffman and actually trying to do Hoffman's. And I met him one time when I was a student, And he said, I have one piece of advice for you. And I said, what's that? He says, sit on your own behind.
Yeah, don't do me, do you? Yeah.
So these are more biomorphic, this particular painting. And it does look to me like they have the particularity that I like to see in a painting. It's not a generalized abstraction. It has a great deal of specificity. It's its own world, and it's very beautiful.
Oh, thanks. This is the beginning of like 6 or 7 years of paintings called Natural Things Part 1 and Part 2. And I only, gave a sample of each period, sort of. But yeah, so, and I did use shapes that I found, in the ground and outside in the woods to like feed off of and to work off of. And yeah, that particular painting, if I could go back, I don't know if I can. Is that back? Oops. Yeah. I mean, this is one of my favorite ones from that. There's another one like it, and it's sort of, but you know what? They're very strong, but you know what? They have, to me, I seem to needed more from it. So later they become much more, the content is more complicated, there's more shapes and forms and textures. But yeah, so, and then you find some materials that make you do things differently too. Like, I found these oil bars and stuff, and then you sort of brushwork, your handling of the material is enhanced, I would say.
Yeah, it interests me when you say I changed because I felt I needed more, because I think that's somewhat how we progress. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why I left the geometric abstract paintings, was because I felt they needed more. And I continually felt like they needed more, they needed more, they needed more. And I still feel they need more. I think they are always going to need more.
Yeah, I was looking through some of the reviews of your exhibitions, and I believe it was Slivka, or who was it, William Zimmer? Somebody was talking about how you were, oh, you were Slivka, saying how that you were a mature artist at the time in that review, and that you knew your way around the canvas and materials. And so it sort of suggests that you got to this place and you didn't need to, you had all the things, all the knowledge you needed, right? But I would like to ask, does one ever, you just said you always need more. Do you ever feel like you're finished? Do you ever feel like, I think personally we are always changing all the time, and every time we touch a new tool or something, that it imparts something to the work that's new that you didn't do before. So you're all still growing, right?
Right, I agree with you 100%. Rose Slifka, the woman who wrote the review, I mean, I felt very good that it was a very positive review, but also I think of de Kooning, what he said about reviews. He said, I don't read them, I just measure them. And if they're long, they're good. If they're short, there's a problem.
Right.
I sometimes I read them, they sound like they're written about somebody else's work.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, I know they're a little dated now, but she, talked about your work over like almost 20 years. So, how, did you have some kind of, relationship with her? Did she do studio visits, and like spend time talking to you about your work?
I think, she was very much involved with the abstract expressionists, and Elaine de Kooning was one of her very close friends. And I think that was in her background. And I think she saw something of that in my work at the time. And I think I think she liked that. She liked that there was some sort of a continuum, even though they were different. I mean, I mean, I wasn't doing de Kooning's, I was doing Harry's. But she saw the connections, which I liked. But like I say, it was positive, I mean, it's nice to have some kind of approval,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't, and then, the thing is, I was looking like Tiffany Bell. I remember her from, I think she was connected to Dia somehow, Dia Art Foundation later. And, but the way people, art critics or art writers wrote about art in the 80s and 90s or even 70s, 80s, is quite different than it is now. And they spoke about gesture and action and color in a way that doesn't get discussed now, which these are the things that make up a painting, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, we can all like figure out some words to go along with it, and how to possibly connect it to our social situation, but it's still made up of paint and line. And so I guess I'm saying I think there should be some more of that. I think
Yeah, I agree. I think when the subjects that when painting and color and space and gesture, when all those things become are no longer subject matter. The subject matter is maybe some political statement or what have you. Yes, I think something's missing, something very definitely, at least for me. I have a longing for it. I'd like to see it come back also. I'd like to see more of it. I don't see why they shouldn't coexist, but I don't have the talent for it or the time. I'm an old man now.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about 55 Mercer Street? I used to go there often to see exhibitions, and a number of people, I think, at Queens College showed there. What was that community like?
Uh, it, one of my closest friends was Tom Doyle, the sculptor, and he's the one who introduced me to 55 Mercer. Before that, we tried to start up the old Brana Gallery, and it failed terribly. So Tom was brought into 55 Mercer, and then he recommended me to 55 Mercer. And it appealed to me because it was a co-op gallery, because at heart I'm a communist, and it made sense for me to be in a cooperative gallery rather than a commercial gallery. I realized at some point I had to move out of it because maybe, Cynthia, you were one of the few people who came, because it was a three flight walk up, and there was no heat for a long time, so the audience was rather slim. I was fortunate; I got a lot of reviews from it, and they probably helped me to move. But there are a lot of good artists, a lot of different artists. They tended to be more abstract. I don't recall anything figurative. Oh, well, maybe, but I don't recall. But it was an interesting place, and I think a lot of the work was interesting, and I think it should have gotten much more attention, but people looked down on it because it was a cooperative gallery. And what they respected, unfortunately, was the art dealer, who seemed to know less than anybody.
Yeah, well, I mean, so, but it turns out that, it was actually, a forerunner, because then that shortly after, there were more co-op galleries, and
Right.
some of the figurative ones, the ones like Blue Mountain and are still around. Yeah,
Right.
and the Sculpture Center, I think that's still around. But I mean, certainly it was a way for artists to get their work out there, and
So,
there still are a number of them, and I think they have a real place, because I mean, commercial galleries are about making money. Those people who start them, they don't. It's not for gratis. So it's a place also of experimentation. So that's you know I think it's laudable, and I do have fond memories of that. And I remember Tom Doyle too. He was great too. Yeah. So
yeah, he taught at Queens. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I wasn't into sculpture. I avoided the 3D. I was
I,
like, but what's weird is that later in the I don't know, in the mid 80s, I was doing these drawings that I don't have represented here, of these boxes, trapezoidal boxes in space. And then I started making them in 3D and made a life size, 6-foot trapezoid box that I painted on all sides. And I was like, that was fun. I liked it. Right. But I was like, where am I going to put all these things? I mean, talk about storage.
yeah, I did a very similar thing. I had been working on a grid, and they had the illusion of three-dimensionality. But I couldn't figure out where to take them. So I thought, well, I'll try to build it. So the grid paintings were all linear. So I got, I guess they're called 1x1s or 3/4 by 3/4. They were like sticks. And I tried to build the painting out of these sticks. Uh, and they weren't too big. I actually got a grant from US Steel for one of them, because I said I wanted to build them bigger and out of steel. And I ended up not doing that. I bought a car instead, which I felt was US Steel wouldn't mind that. But I dropped that pretty quickly. It was kind of the same thing. What are you going to do with it? And it's like, there's so much that I need to know. Why do I have to take anything more if I don't have to? This is called white painting.
Yes,
And
beautiful.
you talked about finishing. This was a painting that I was working on, and I didn't feel like I was getting anywhere. And then I felt like I was getting close, but it needed a little bit more. And then Trudy, my wife, and one of her friends came into the studio, and they looked at it and they really liked it, and they said, it's finished. And I said, okay.
Okay.
And I'm glad they came in. I'm glad I was able to stop. Albert Ryder said it's a wise man who knows when to cry halt to his paintings. And I was not wise. I mean,
Well, it's sort of, sometimes though, I mean, I've had a few paintings that happened really quickly, unexpectedly, so it's like, oh, I don't think I should touch that, you know, and but then there's, even this year, this is not my usual. I mean, usually I don't start with a plan. I have, like, I guess I have a theme, I'll say. I come up with a title that um and it's usually based on something I've seen that excites my eye. But within that, I could do whatever. It there's no actual demands that I operate in any particular way, but it's just like, like I had this series, Gwen Force Soup and the Proximity of Matter. And friend sent a photograph of orange photograph. It was a square. It was on Facebook, and I just thought, oh my God, this is the most beautiful thing I've seen ever. And I got really excited. It turned out to be a bowl of soup.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I found an old drawing of mine from like years ago that I even named the Proximity of Matter. And I just put the two together, and it was about form and their location in space and how they interacted. So in that way, anything can happen. And so that's the way I actually move through the world in my work, right? So, but yeah, after the abstract expressionist phase, I found I needed I wanted more structure, I wanted to be building on and off something. And so I began work on the currency of meaning, and that was really helped along with Suzanne Langer's book, Symbolism in Art, which is an older, philosophical text on art and symbolism and ideas. And I still have that. And so while, and it's about how you see. So it was a kind of inspirational in a way about how to, use the eye and the way we put information together. So yeah, so that just began that road that lasted like for 15 paintings, probably like 2 years, and expanded with, looking into ancient signs and symbols, and approximating some kind of language looking thing with the mark making across the paints. So yeah, this is a menagerie of players. This is before all that. That's when I was still just getting out of school, I guess. I left school. But, and here we see sort of this combination of the geometry and this expressionism, and then a certain kind of mark making coming together.
They're very atmospheric, and the color is making the light, which is very beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. So, and these are all pastels. And then, yeah, one summer I went to accompany my partner to summer stock. So, so I did a lot of paintings on paper, but large ones. Yeah, this is an example of currency of meaning, and you can see that these like marks in the bands here, they all approximate some kind of language that even, these marks up here on the top, because of the way they move around and gesticulate across the surface, they also can allude to, they are movement, but they also may mean something.
Yeah, they kind of wiggle around in the space. They kind of
Yeah.
wiggle across the top. The bottom part, strangely enough, it reminds me of my painting Deposit.
Oh, really?
In the history of where the triangles were at one point is there. You have to fight for it a little bit, but it makes the painting more interesting for me. It's again, it's like showing the history of how the painting came about.
Yeah. So let me ask you about when you were living on the farm. You lived on the farm for quite a while. How did that impact your work, or did it? I read that you like to fish a lot when you were out there.
Yeah, we didn't actually live on the farm. We had a loft in the city, and I was commuting back and forth to the city for teaching. So I would go into the city, I'd stay overnight, or 2 nights sometimes, and then I drive back. It was a long drive. But actually, what happened was uh, I was very poor up until Queens College, up until I started teaching. And when I started teaching, I started making some money. I mean, I started out making $13,000 a year, which was about the same as a sanitation worker. But I felt rich. I felt very rich, and I felt we had to do something with the money, or else I was going to spend it on ties and stuff like that. And my friend Tom Doyle had a place that he called a farm, and we went up and visited at certain points. And I thought, well, gee, I'd like to buy a piece of land, buy something. And it had to do with of being in a totally non-art environment. The farmers had no understanding of what I was doing, and that was good. They had a different attitude about everything. I mean, at one point, one of the farmers said to me, he says, "That's a fact. I didn't read that in no book." It was kind of a different experience. And I've always loved water. I love fishing. I mean, I was very fortunate to be able to squeeze it into my life. But we were on the farm for about 10 years, but I never thought of it as, well, this is our home. I mean, you have to have some contact with people who have some kind of intellectual involvement other than we got to get the hay in before it rains. So maybe the only real influence it had on my work was that I was in nature. You know, I wasn't in the city, and I've always liked being in the country more than in the city. Necessary to be in the city sometimes, but not for me, not my style.
Well, I think, all right, this past summer, I spent a month in Normandy and at this cottage, and it's supposed to be a working holiday, and it actually turned out to be that. But the thing was, every time I opened the door, because it was in this small town, and there were farms everywhere. We had no idea. I was just a random, it was a random thing because I didn't have a map to say, oh, I'm gonna be, choose this place because of what it was. I had no idea. I just it was random, but it was really so nice. And I had no idea that I really needed some peace and quiet like that.
Yeah.
And whatsoever. I felt so good. Like every time I opened the doors. And I don't like insects either. So, but it was really great. So, and I wanted to do 14 paintings on paper related to this new body of work I'm working on. And I actually did it because previously I would travel, take a short vacation or something and bring all this material with me and never do anything. So, so I felt quite successful this past year. And being in the country was, well, I really think was part of it somehow. But yeah, it's sort of like you let go of some of your tension when you're out there. But yeah, I wouldn't want to be there all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's nice to breathe fresh air. It's
Yeah.
nice to not have all that noise.
So one of the other things, do you think, I know you said you and Kajuri were like friends, but I was looking at some of his work and his earlier work, and which I also like, and later he put more figurative elements in there, but still his color and brushwork were very consistent, and in some ways, and in ways reminds me of of yours. So, do you think that was, do you think that was sort of like a generational thing, like the period that you guys came up in influenced you? But, you know, again, there were plenty of other people doing other work in other ways. So, but there's some similarities.
I think neither of us influenced the other in any way, shape, or form. I was much younger, but I think we were influenced by the same people to a great extent, and certainly influenced by abstract expressionists. And both of us, I think, used drawing a lot to establish the structure in the painting. Some of Cajori's later work are not immediately visible, but I think they have the same kind of quality that the Mondrian that you referred to, the tree, but after it transformed itself into planes and structure, I think that had probably something to do with it.
Yeah.
But I think we were involved with some of the same ideas, with some of the same people. He was much more established as an artist by a long shot. And one of the things I didn't like about his, we taught one time in adjoining rooms. Maybe you remember those studios.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I went into his classroom for something, and all the students were painting little Cajoris. And I thought that's not such a good thing. They look really good, but they needed to be something other than that.
Well, what about Louis Finkelstein?
Well, he was a nightmare. I mean, I knew Louis from Philadelphia, from when I went to school in Philadelphia, and he was considered to be this brilliant guy. And he was smart as hell. He didn't have much, he wasn't much of a painter. He tried very hard. He started out abstractly and then became a dedicated figure painter. And he was, he was like the chairman of Queens College. And I always thought of teaching as something I needed to do, but I didn't want to have it interfere with my painting. And I think he was very much involved with teaching, and the painting was very much secondary. So at some point we didn't get along very well. But he was bright. I remember one time, you remember the Artists Club that in New York?
Yes.
I went to a couple of meetings before it disbanded, and Louis was giving some kind of a talk on something. And Milton Resnick at the end of it, with a questioning period, said, "We hear you're very smart. We like your talking, but you sound like you got a mattress in front of you." And I think that was kind of, it hurt him. I know it hurt him. I think,
obviously he meant to hurt his feelings, but he did. Yeah, he had an interesting way of speaking. But
yeah,
I remember that one point there were students who, like, it was like Louis had this like following, these like representational students, painter students, who were like, he was like, the leader, and they were all, yeah, I remember this quite well. But they were totally not interested in abstraction, and Louis was the leader. He was in charge.
there was a group of teachers there who were fanatical about figure painting. I mean, Gabriel Latterman and Eli Friedman,
Yeah.
Bob Bermelin. I think they tolerated me for some reason, although at a certain point they tried to get rid of me.
Really?
Yeah. That's when I actually started showing out of 55 Mercer, because they said I wasn't showing in a commercial gallery, and I wasn't. It was 55 Mercer was disrespected by them. I think also because it was a lot of abstract work.
Hmm.
But that's when I went to Grunebaum Gallery, and they couldn't get rid of me, much as they might have liked to. They tried to get rid of Benny Andrews too, which was, I mean, Benny was transferred and supposedly was going to enter the Queen's art department. And I was on the P&B committee at that time, and these guys were putting down his work. And they said, we can't bring him in. We don't like what he's doing. And I said, you're going to take that upstairs to the deans, and they're going to look at you like you're a bunch of fools. I said, he's got a resume longer than any of you could put combined. And aside from that, his work comes from a culture that's different, much different than yours. I don't think you understand it. Anyway, so he came in and we became good friends. I really enjoyed Benny a lot. I was very sad when he died. It was like somebody blew out a candle. So much for Louis Finkelstein.
Yeah, I remember also Lois Dodd. I really liked her. I really did.
Did you have Rosemary Beck at all?
Yes, yes, I took a class with her.
She was a nutcase, but I liked her a lot.
Yeah, she was something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Still have a picture of her walking down the street with this giant canvas. This is large canvas when she's like leaving campus or something. But I still can see that.
She used to say to me, abstract painting isn't as difficult as figure painting. And I said, that's not the case. It's really not the case. I mean, I wish it were. I wish it were easier. But if I painted figuratively, I think it'd be just as difficult for me. It's who you are and what you're able to bring to the table. But she was amusing. She was intimidated by Louis Finkelstein and those guys. I think she didn't get treated all that well, and I think partly it was because she was a woman.
Yeah. Well, back in those days, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, well, what do you think? I've been like, occasionally, like YouTube is great, right? Because now you can go to all the art fairs and virtually, there's all these people who do walkarounds. And and I wonder, I mean, there's a bit of abstraction. There's much more figuration than there is abstraction. And there's so much work that's really devoted to popular culture and using popular culture imagery. What do you think about that? I mean,
I think unfortunately, what's art and what's not art is so far out of our hands anymore. It's like the critics, the collectors, especially the collectors decide what art is. And they are really just trying to increase the value of their investment. So there's so much bad stuff that you have to wade through to see the good stuff. And when I think about the future, I don't think so much about painting. I think about the future of our poor planet. So you can't forecast the future. You're hopeful
yeah.
that there's gonna be a future.
I know a lot is we're in a planet's in a state it's not respected enough, and there's too much violence against each of people, human beings, and wildlife for sure, and flora too.
Yeah, we're going to lose all the things we love, all the things that inspired us, that made us. And you're right, everything looks like it's endangered in some way or another. I mean, some progress has been made, but I think they're unaware of, they refuse to acknowledge the fact that we're in deep trouble. We really are. So I keep my fingers crossed that there will be painting 100 years from now. And maybe it'll be abstract, maybe it'll be figurative, but at least it'll have survived.
Well, you said in one article that art is a continuum and that it began with the first handprint in a cave. And so that leads me to think that whatever happens, people will still be artists trying to recreate the world in some way or another.
Yeah, they may still be back in the cave though.
Well, I want to thank you so much for this time, for this hour of your time, and meeting you again and talking about your work and seeing your work. And I hope people got a real eyeful, because your painting is, I think, really quite extraordinary and moving. And I hope that others will get to see more of it. And I want to thank you and Trudy for getting this together.
And I want to thank you. It's been a pleasure seeing you after all these years and talking with you and seeing more of your work.
Okay, all right. So let's keep in touch. You have my email, Trudy has it, and next time I do anything, I'll let you know about it.
Very good.
All right, you have a wonderful